Howdy folks, this is Brian Eggleton. I am the boot service and technical coach for the Sun Valley Ski Education Foundation Alpine program. I work with U14, U16, and FIS level athletes. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about basic equipment setup guidelines that apply to both new skis as well as used skis that are being put into service for a second season. The first item with any set of skis that's important to bear in mind for basic equipment setup guidelines is to make sure that the base of the ski from one metal edge all the way across to the other is flat. This is something that can be easily checked with a TrueBar in any ski shop or potentially with your coach. It's generally okay to consider a brand new ski out of the wrapper as having a flat base. However, this should be checked to verify that a new ski does indeed have a flat base. For any used skis that are being put back into service for a second season, it's probably going to require, in all cases, a stone grind in a ski shop in order to get the base of the ski back to flat. The next item on the list of basic equipment setup guidelines for all athletes is the base bevel and side edge bevel for each of the different disciplines in alpine ski racing. For slalom discipline, the recommended starting base bevels for all athletes are 0.5 base bevel and 3-degree side edge bevel. For giant slalom or GS, the base bevel changes to 0.7 degrees and the side edge bevel remains at 3 degrees. For speed events, Super G and downhill, the recommended base bevel changes to 1 degree and the side edge bevel remains at 3 degrees. It's important to note that these base bevel recommendations are recommendations and guidelines for where we start for every athlete. This creates consistency in how the skis are prepared across all athletes and makes the job of the coach identifying what athletes should be working on the hill easier. Within that context, it's important to note that some athletes may depart from these bevel recommendations in conjunction with feedback from their coaching staff. So this is really nothing more than meant as a guideline and starting point. Another item for basic equipment setup guidelines is going to relate to bindings. And every alpine race ski system is going to come with a ski and a plate, and then the binding is placed on top of the plate. If an athlete has multiple pairs of skis for a discipline, it's important to make sure that the toes for all the skis for a given discipline are located in the same location on the plate, and also the heel should be located on the same location on the plate within that discipline. What this creates is the ability for each pair of skis in a discipline to feel consistent because the binding is located in the same location. And then of course for used skis, the whole binding system should be reviewed to make sure it's in the correct location rather than just adjusting the heel piece for forward pressure. A final note on bindings and basic equipment setup guidelines is going to relate to the height of the toe of the binding and the height of the heel of the binding. There's two things to think about here. The first is that the differential in the height of the heel to the toe should be 2 millimeters, measure 2 millimeters less in the height than the height in the heel. What this creates is a binding ramp angle. Much like the conversation around bevels, binding ramp angle can become a pretty deep conversation pretty quickly. So what I want to note in this conversation about the toe measuring 2 millimeters less than the heel, again, this is a starting point. What this does is create consistency in what coaching staff is seeing on the hill for athletes at the beginning of the season. And it's not so much that we know that -2 is correct for every athlete, but we also know that it is a generally accepted ramp angle for a binding across the majority of vendors that works well for all athletes as a starting point. A final note on this conversation around stack height of the ski, plate, and binding is that both USSA and FIS have a maximum stack height as part of their regulations for equipment, and the maximum stack height of the system is 50 millimeters. So it's generally thought of as a best practice to only stack to 49 millimeters to provide some room for change in measuring tools that may be used at a race versus in a shop. So always make sure to stack to under 50 millimeters with your binding stack height.